The wind on the Isle of Skye doesn't howl, it screams, tearing at the jagged cliffs like a ghost seeking vengeance. Somewhere in the silence of this frozen landscape, a truth is rotting, buried deeper than the roots of these ancient stones. Welcome to Dark Echoes, where we unravel the tangled threads of a disappearance that was never meant to be solved. I stand at the threshold of the house, my fingers trembling as they brush the cold, rusted iron of the gate. This place is a mausoleum of memories, a cage built from whispers, and the heavy, suffocating scent of ozone and decay. I have come back to finish the final chapter, to confront the shadows that have followed me across the gray, churning Atlantic. The manuscript in my hand feels heavy, not with ink and paper, but with the weight of every lie I ever told her. I can hear her voice in the rattling window panes, a soft, melodic taunt that cuts through the storm. "Do you hear that, Clara?" I whisper into the void, my voice barely audible against the roar of the gale. "I know you are watching from the corners of this room, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to admit what I did in the dark." But the house only answers with the rhythmic thud of a loose shutter, a heartbeat that isn't mine. I step inside, and the door clicks shut behind me with the finality of a prison cell lock. The air is thick with the smell of dried lavender, and something metallic like blood on a cold blade. I am finally home, but I fear that I am no longer the one in control of this nightmare. The air inside the cottage is not merely cold. It is a stagnant Arctic void that clings to my skin like a shroud. Every floorboard groans under my weight, a protest against the intrusion of a man who thought he had buried his past beneath the soil of a different life. My breath hitches in my throat, forming fleeting clouds of mist that vanish into the suffocating darkness of the hallway. I am walking through a graveyard of my own making, where every shadow seems to stretch and reach for me with invisible fingers. I drop to my knees, my pulse hammering against my ribs, and scan the dust-covered floorboards for any sign of her. That is when I see it, a small glinting sliver of silver wedged deep within the cracked wood. It is her earring, the very piece of jewelry I distinctly remember placing in the velvet lining of her coffin, my hand steady as I sealed her away forever. My fingers tremble as I reach down, the metal biting into my skin with an icy, impossible reality that defies all logic. "Clara, how can this be here?" I whisper the name into the empty, echoing chamber, but my voice sounds alien, hollow, and utterly broken. I have spent years meticulously constructing a narrative of grief, a fortress of lies designed to keep my secrets buried, but this single tiny object is a wrecking ball shattering the walls of my sanity. The room seems to tilt, the walls closing in as the realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. If she is dead, then who left this here? If I am the only one who knows where she lies, then who is playing this cruel, twisted game with my reality? I stand up, clutching the earring so tightly the silver prongs pierce my palm, and stare into the abyss of the upstairs bedroom. I stumble out of the cottage, the biting wind of the Isle of Skye tearing at my coat like a desperate spirit. The path to the inn is a jagged scar against the landscape, leading me toward the only warmth in this godforsaken place. Mrs. McLeod is waiting by the hearth, her silhouette framed by the flickering orange glow of a dying fire. She does not look up as I enter, yet I feel the weight of her gaze tracking my every movement across the worn floorboards. I approach the counter, the silver earring still burning a hole in my pocket, and try to mask the tremor in my voice. She finally turns, her eyes as cold and gray as the North Sea, and she offers a smile that never reaches those hollow, knowing depths. She speaks of the tides, warning me that the waters here are hungry, and that they refuse to let go of what they have claimed. Her words feel like a calculated trap, a riddle designed to unravel the remaining threads of my composure. As she leans in, the scent of brine and old secrets fills the space between us, suffocating and sharp. I realize then that I am not a guest in this house, but a specimen being studied under a microscope. The floorboards beneath me seem to shift, and for a terrifying second, I wonder if the entire island is merely a stage built to watch me break. I turn to leave, but the front door is locked from the outside, the metal bolt sliding home with a finality that stops my heart dead in my chest. I am trapped in this suffocating room, the air thick with the smell of damp wool and decay. My trembling fingers reach for the stack of papers I stole from the desk, the police reports from the night Clara vanished. The ink is bled and smeared with entire paragraphs aggressively redacted, leaving behind only jagged black voids that mock my desperate need for the truth. I scan the dates, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird trying to break free. The timeline is fractured, a mosaic of missing moments that I cannot reconcile with my own recollection of that night. I remember the screaming, the sound of glass shattering against the hardwood, and then a sudden absolute silence. My mind feels like a rusted gear forced to turn, grinding against the jagged edges of a memory I am terrified to fully recover. I can hear Mrs. McLeod humming in the kitchen, a low, discordant melody that seems to seep through the walls. She knows what is hidden in those blacked-out lines. She has to. I whisper her name into the shadows, testing the weight of the accusation, but my voice sounds thin and alien to my own ears. I am the architect of my own ruin, caught in a labyrinth where every turn leads back to a ghost I thought I had buried. I pull a photograph from the bottom of the pile, a grainy image of the hallway floor. And there, plain as day, is a footprint that is not mine. My breath hitches, the realization striking me with the force of a physical blow. I am not being haunted by her spirit. I am being hunted by the living. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I stumbled toward the front door, my vision blurring at the edges. A thick, cream-colored envelope sat on the welcome mat, its surface damp from the relentless island mist. I picked it up with shaking hands. The paper felt heavy, expensive, and carried the faint, haunting scent of lavender that Clara always favored. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that drowned out the distant, mournful cry of a gull circling the moors. I tore the seal, my skin crawling with the sudden, icy realization that this was not a relic of the past, but an urgent demand from the present. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, elegant, and possessed of a cruel precision that mirrored her cold intellect. It was postmarked from the village shop just 3 miles away, dated only hours ago. She was here. She had been watching me the entire time, lurking in the shadows of the very home I thought was my sanctuary. I am not a ghost, Elias, the letter whispered in her looping script. I am the consequence. The words felt like a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs as I stared out into the desolate, gray expanse of the moors. I sprinted into the biting wind, my boots sinking into the sodden peat as I scanned the horizon for a silhouette, a flicker of movement, anything. The fog swirled like a shroud around the jagged rocks, obscuring the path ahead and mocking my frantic, directionless search. Every movement in the tall grass made me flinch. Was that her? Or just the wind playing tricks on a mind already fractured by guilt? I screamed her name into the void, but the moor offered no answer, only a deepening, suffocating silence that felt like a closing trap. Sleep has become a luxury I can no longer afford, a phantom weight that presses against my eyelids whenever I try to drift away. The cottage has transformed into a labyrinth of shifting wood and groaning beams, where every corner holds a silhouette that mimics her grace. I pace the floorboards until my feet bleed, terrified that if I close my eyes, the reality I have painstakingly constructed will finally shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces. The shadows are no longer just absence of light. They are sentient, creeping toward me with the patient, cold intent of a predator. I began tearing the wallpaper away, convinced that she had hidden microphones or cameras within the insulation. A frantic, obsessive search for the truth. My fingers are raw and stained with dust, yet I find nothing but the hollow, mocking silence of the walls. There is a metallic tang in the air, the scent of old copper and decay, that makes me gag as I claw deeper into the foundations of this house. Clara, stop this! I screamed into the darkness, my voice cracking like brittle glass against the stone. Was I talking to a ghost? Or merely echoing the broken fragments of my own fractured psyche? I can hear her laughter, faint and rhythmic, vibrating through the very floorboards I stand upon, taunting me for the sins I thought I had buried. The mirror in the hallway has become my greatest enemy. It shows a man I barely recognize, hollow-eyed and trembling. I fear that the shadow standing behind me in the reflection isn't a trick of the light, but the manifestation of my own unraveling soul. If I turn around now, will I finally face the consequence she promised, or will I find only the empty, suffocating void of my own madness? My hands tremble as I pry at the loose floorboard in my study. The wood groans, resisting my intrusion as if the house itself is trying to protect a secret. The scent of damp earth and rot rises from the gap, a suffocating perfume of the grave. I pull, nails digging into the splintered oak, until the board finally gives way with a sharp, sickening crack that echoes through the silence. Inside the cavity lies a small leather-bound box, cold to the touch and heavy with the weight of hidden malice. I lift the lid, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate for flight. Inside are photographs, dozens of them scattered like fallen leaves. My breath hitches in my throat as I sift through the stack. They are pictures of me, taken from the dense bushes outside our home, weeks, perhaps months, before she ever vanished. I see myself in the kitchen, unaware and arrogant, pouring a drink. I see myself pacing the garden, plotting the very cage I thought I was building for her. The angles are voyeuristic, clinical, and predatory, capturing me in moments of absolute, ugly vulnerability. "You were watching me," I whisper, the sound barely audible over the roar of my own blood. "You were the spider, Clara, and I was just the fly caught in your web." A dark, hysterical laugh bubbles up in my chest, bitter and sharp. If she was watching me then, she was watching me break. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. The haunting wasn't a tragedy, it was a performance. I am staring at the evidence of my own obsolescence. A man trapped in a script he didn't write. I look toward the dark doorway, half expecting to see her standing there, grinning in the shadows. Is she still here? Is she watching me discover this final devastating piece of the puzzle right now? I storm out of the house, the freezing sky wind whipping against my face as I march toward the inn. Mrs. McLeod is waiting by the hearth, her silhouette framed by the dying embers of a fire that seems to offer no warmth. She doesn't look surprised to see me. She looks like someone who has been waiting for the clock to strike midnight for a very long time. My hands are still stained with the dust of the floorboards, and I slam the photographs onto the heavy wooden table between us. I demand to know how she could have stood by while my wife was being systematically erased, or so I thought. The innkeeper merely lets out a long, shuddering sigh, her eyes tracking the jagged edges of the photos with a chilling, calm detachment. She leans forward, the light catching the silver in her hair, and whispers that I am the one who never understood the nature of the game. She reveals that Clara wasn't a victim hiding in a cage, but a woman who spent years meticulously documenting every shadow I cast. My skin crawls as she tells me that she was not an accomplice to a ghost, but a witness to a long overdue escape. I feel the floor beneath me tilt, the reality of my marriage dissolving into a series of calculated, cold-blooded maneuvers. If Clara was the hunter, then who am I? I turn to leave, but the front door is locked, bolted from the outside, and the silence that follows is deafening. The locked door mocks me with its silence, a heavy iron bolt holding me captive in this den of whispers. I scramble toward the bookshelf, my trembling fingers clawing at the spines of leather-bound volumes that have collected dust for decades. I pull a heavy, hollowed-out tome from the shelf, a makeshift vault hiding in plain sight. Inside, nestled within the velvet lining, lies a digital recorder, its small red light blinking like a rhythmic, judging eye in the dark. My pulse hammers against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat signaling the end of my carefully constructed lies. I press play, and the room fills with a voice I haven't heard in months, Clara's voice, clear, cold, and utterly devoid of the fear I once manufactured for her. She is speaking to someone, her tone clinical and precise, detailing the exact architecture of my psychological collapse. She laughs, a sharp, jagged sound that cuts through the air, as she discusses how to lure me into this island trap. Every word she speaks is a surgical strike against my sanity, mapping out the precise moment I would finally break. The recording continues, detailing a plan that was never about her disappearance, but about my total systematic erasure from existence. I stand frozen, the device vibrating in my palm, as the finality of her vengeance settles over me like a shroud. The silence that follows is not empty. It is a confession, confirming that I was never the architect of our home, but merely the prisoner in her elaborate, long-term experiment. I stare at the recorder, my breath hitching in my chest as the audio shifts from her laughter to the sound of my own voice, a voice I do not recognize. The man on the tape is cold, calculating, and cruel, describing the exact moment I trapped Clara within the walls of our own home. I try to scream, but the sound dies in my throat, choked by the sudden, terrifying realization that my memories of her death are nothing but a fractured, convenient fiction. My mind is a house of glass, and with every passing second, the stones of reality are shattering it into dust. I scramble to the desk, tearing through the drawers until my fingers brush against a leather portfolio. Inside, I find photos not of a grieving husband, but of a predator meticulously documenting his victim. I see myself in the background of images I don't remember taking, watching her with eyes that hold no love, only a possessive hollow void. The evidence is undeniable, a physical weight pressing down on my lungs, forcing me to confront the monster I have been hiding from myself. I whisper her name into the oppressive silence of the room, begging for an explanation that I know will never come, but the silence mocks me, echoing with the ghost of a woman who was never the victim, but the strategist of my undoing. I am the architect of my own ruin, and the walls are closing in tighter and faster than I ever thought possible. If she is alive, then I am already dead, a ghost haunting the wreckage of a life I never truly lived. The sky outside has turned the color of a bruised lung, and the wind, a low, mournful howl, begins to rattle the window panes with the force of 1,000 fists. The mainland is gone, severed by the churning black teeth of the Atlantic, leaving me marooned on this godforsaken rock. I am trapped in a cage of my own making, the storm acting as the final lock on a door I never wanted to open. Every shadow in this room feels like it's breathing, waiting for the moment I finally break. I stumble toward the hallway, my fingers tracing the damp wallpaper until I find the loose floorboard, the one I had carefully pried up in a fugue state weeks ago. Beneath it lies a trail of salt and wet sand, leading not to the cellar, but directly toward the jagged, unforgiving cliffs that overlook the sea. It is a path of breadcrumbs laid by a phantom, a deliberate invitation into the dark belly of the island. My pulse thunders in my ears, a frantic drumbeat signaling that the hunt has reached its apex. I speak her name into the howling gale, my voice cracking under the weight of 1,000 secrets finally surfacing. "Clara, are you there?" I scream, but the wind only shreds the words, throwing them back in my face like a mocking accusation. I am terrified that if I walk out into that rain, I will find her waiting, not as a ghost, but as the judge, jury, and executioner I so richly deserve. The storm surges, a sudden blinding flash of lightning illuminating the path ahead, and for a split second, I see a silhouette standing at the very edge of the precipice. My heart stops, caught between the hope that she is alive and the paralyzing dread that she has finally come to finish what I started. I step out into the rain, the cold biting deep into my skin, knowing that there is no turning back from the edge of the world. The rain lashes against the stone walls of the study, but inside, the air is thick with a suffocating, unnatural silence. My hands tremble as I pull the loose floorboard away, revealing not the expected damp rot, but a small leather-bound journal tucked into a velvet-lined void. It is Clara's handwriting, neat and precise, yet every word carved into the page feels like a jagged blade pressed against my throat. The storm outside fades into a dull hum, replaced by the deafening rhythm of my own unraveling psyche. I flip through the pages, expecting a lover's diary, but finding instead a clinical forensic map of my own descent into madness. Each entry details my moods, my violent outbursts, and the precise moments I manipulated her reality to suit my dark, fractured needs. She hadn't just been living with me. She had been documenting the monster I desperately tried to bury under layers of grief. My lungs tighten, the oxygen turning to lead as I realized the cage I thought I built for her was, in fact, the prison I had been architecting for myself. I whisper to the empty room. Was I ever the one in control? The silence is my only answer, cold and absolute, as the final entry confirms my deepest, most buried terror. She was never the victim in this game, but the observer, watching me destroy myself from the shadows. I dropped the book, its pages fluttering open to a photograph of me, taken from behind, in the very moment I thought I was alone. The realization hits with the force of a tidal wave. I am not the hunter searching for a ghost. I am the specimen being studied by the woman I tried to erase. The floorboards groan beneath me as I look toward the darkened doorway, wondering if she is standing there right now, waiting for the final act of this tragedy to play out. The shadows in the corner of the room begin to coalesce, shifting like ink dropped into water. I stare, my breath hitching in my chest, as the dark silhouette detaches itself from the wallpaper. A figure I had mourned, a ghost I had built a shrine to, now breathing in the same stale air as me. She does not look like a phantom. She looks solid, composed, and terrifyingly real. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of denial, and dawning horror as the truth finally settles into my bones. I scramble backward, my fingers brushing the cold floorboards, seeking some weapon or comfort, but I find only the weight of my own past sins staring back at me. She steps into the dim light, her eyes devoid of the warmth I once claimed to own. She doesn't speak at first, her gaze tracing the line of my trembling hands as if she is cataloging every ounce of my disintegration. "Did you think your cages were invisible, Elias?" she asks, her voice a smooth, cutting blade that slices through the silence of the storm. The realization hits me with the force of an executioner's axe. Every ghost I felt, every whisper I heard, was a calculated frequency, a symphony of gaslighting composed by the woman I tried to silence. I am not the master of this house. I am the captive of her perfect, patient retribution. She tilts her head, and for a fleeting second, I see the reflection of my own madness in her eyes. The game is over, and I have lost long before I even arrived on this island. As she reaches out to touch the digital recorder resting on the table, I realize the final horrific truth. My own voice, trapped on those tapes, is the anchor that will pull me into the dark forever. The room spins, the floorboards beneath me feeling like shifting sand. Every piece of this twisted puzzle, the misplaced earring, the haunting letters, the phantom whispers, snaps into a terrifying singular focus. I look at Clara, and for the first time I see the architect, not the victim. She hasn't been hiding in the shadows. She has been orchestrating every movement of my descent from the very start. The isolation of this island wasn't my sanctuary. It was my cage. I begin to trace the timeline of my own unraveling, realizing how easily she manipulated my fragile, fractured mind. She placed the clues, fed my paranoia, and watched with clinical detachment as I tore my own world apart. Each supernatural event was just a gear in her machine, calibrated to push me closer to the edge. The air feels thinner now, heavy with the weight of her calculated vengeance. "You thought you were the predator, Elias," she says, her voice devoid of any tremor. "But you were always the prey." Her words act like a scalpel, peeling away the last layers of my carefully constructed denial. I am left exposed, a man who built a labyrinth only to find himself trapped at its dead end. The silence that follows is deafening, a void where my sanity used to reside. She moves toward the recorder, her finger hovering over the play button, and I know exactly what I am about to hear. The tapes contain my own confessions, spoken in moments of weakness I didn't even know I had. Is this the end of the game, or simply the beginning of my true eternal prison? The tape begins to spin, and my own voice fills the room, a jagged, confession-filled confession I don't remember giving. Every word is a hammer blow, shattering the glass walls of the life I thought I had built. The fog outside presses against the window panes like a living, suffocating shroud, eager to swallow the wreckage of my soul. I am no longer a man. I am a series of recorded mistakes playing on a loop. The floor beneath me feels like it might dissolve into the dark, churning sea below. Sirens begin to wail in the distance, cutting through the heavy, salt-drenched air of sky like a sharp blade. They are coming for the ghost, but they are finding only a broken man. A shell of a predator who finally realized he was the one being hunted. Mrs. McLeod stands in the doorway, her expression as cold and unyielding as the granite cliffs. She doesn't need to speak. Her silence is a verdict, confirming that my cage was designed with absolute, surgical precision. "You were never meant to leave this island, Elias," she whispers, while the police lights begin to paint the room in rhythmic flashes of blue and red. The truth is a heavy, suffocating blanket that I can no longer throw off, and I realize the prison I feared was always inside my own head. My journey into the dark has reached its final bitter destination. To uncover more secrets, subscribe to Swasti Diaries.